afternoon, everyone. Human beings are on the planet for one reason. We're here to connect. Through connecting, we extend our network, we create value for our organizations, and as a result, we have opportunities created for ourselves. If you can find ways to connect with the people around you more effectively on an ongoing basis, then the result of your impact in the world is going to be greater. 3 things. We all have choice and possibility every single day. Fit matters, and it's incredibly important for us to be 100% there. I grew up in a tiny little town in Wyoming. If the slide comes up, you guys will get to see a picture of it. It's at the base of the mountains, and this tiny little town in Wyoming has enormous possibilities. As you can imagine, for those of you who have visited Wyoming, there are a few people in Wyoming, but a lot of natural resources. So Wyoming has great money to put towards schools because of the taxes off gas and oil. As a result, students in our schools are allowed opportunities to play any sport they want, play any instrument, participate in debate, be part of student government. The world is open for those students, so I had a lot of opportunities that most kids in the U.S. don't have. On top of that, I grew up with a dad who was born in my hometown of Pinedale, Wyoming, and he was an avid sportsman. He was very much an athlete. He was also a consummate skier. He was an expert skier. It was beautiful to watch coming down the mountain. And he taught all of us how to ski. There were 4 kids in my family. So each weekend, we would all throw our gear into the car, and we'd head up to the mountain to spend all day Saturday and all day Sunday skiing. It was so much fun. And I loved to ski. I loved to be up in the mountains. My dad was on ski patrol, so he was out patrolling the mountain or teaching lessons to people who were new to skiing. And he came to me when I was probably 12 or 13. And he said, you know, Bobbi, if you could practice a bit more, if you push yourself a bit harder, you could be an excellent skier. You could be really good. But you have to be willing to take some risk. And I said, you know, Dad, I'm pretty good with how well I ski. I can make it down the mountain. I can ski with my friends. And that's good enough for me. I'm not risking myself. I'm going to kill myself getting to the bottom. And he said, don't you want to be really good? Don't you want to be better? Now, how many of y'all ski? All right, how many of y'all like falling when you ski? Falling is not fun when you ski. It's hard. You lose skis, you lose poles. And then if you're in any amount of power, it's really hard to get back up on your feet with those sticks on your boots. So I didn't like falling, and that's what I told my dad. You know, Dad, I just don't like to fall. And he said, you know, Bobbi, if you're not falling down, you're not learning. My dad created for me this mindset that said it's okay to fail. It's okay to put yourself at risk, to try something that makes you uncomfortable. In addition to that, my dad was incredibly curious about the world. No matter where he traveled, he went and dove all over the world with my mom, he would learn a bit of the language, he'd get to know somebody who was local. And then when he'd come back home, back in the days where we had landlines and answering machines, he'd put a little voice recording on the answering machine in that new language. He was extraordinary in all of those ways, and he was also extraordinary in that he never once told me I couldn't do something because I was the girl. So that was a great capacity for me. He had the ability to be curious about the world and instilled that in me as well. I went to college here locally, not far away from here, and it's an expensive school. I couldn't have gone there without an ROTC scholarship, so that's how I attended. I had an Army ROTC scholarship, and right after graduation, went active duty in the Army. Now, the Army was amazing. I don't come from a military family, so I didn't have a lot of preconceptions or experience around the military. But what I loved about the Army was that it put me in positions where I had to do stuff I wasn't comfortable doing. Really pushed me into areas where, if I'd been given a choice, I probably wouldn't have chosen to do those things. But it's not like the Army says, listen, this might be a little hard for you today, or maybe you just want to take a break, go sit under the tree, and we're all going to get over here and take care of some stuff. Well, one of the areas where I'm really uncomfortable is I have a terrible fear of heights. But one of the basic skills in the Army is learning to rappel. So they taught us how to put the gear, to put the harnesses on, and they taught us how to do the techniques for rappelling. They lined us up. I was still a cadet at the time. We climbed a 40-foot tower. We got to the top of the tower. And each of the positions was assigned to drill sergeant. Now, you know the drill sergeants. They're the Smokey the Bear hat guys that had nails for breakfast and were no worse for the experience. These are tough guys. So I lined up and I got into position with my drill sergeant. He talked me down into position. And for those of you who rappel know that what happens is you hook your feet on the edge of whatever it is you're rappelling off of and you drop down into an L position. So your feet are straight out in front of you with your knees locked. You've got your hand holding the rope above you, and this hand behind you with the rope is what's holding you and keeping you from falling. And it doesn't matter how weak you are in this hand or how much you weigh, you are not going to fall if you keep that rope up against your back. The physics are designed that way. So it's actually pretty safe, believe it or not, hanging off a 40-foot tower. But I was shaking, I was scared. I got down into position, I was good. My drill sergeant had my eyes locked with him, and he said, "All right, cadet, go." And the way it works is you push off hard with your knees, and you swing out and grab, you let go of the rope a little bit, let it slide through your hand, and that's how you bounce down the wall. So he said, "Go," and I froze. I couldn't move. I was scared to death, and I'd forgotten all my training. I had no idea what I was doing. You could see the terror in my eyes, so he leaned farther over the edge of the tower, and he said, "Get the hell off my tower." And I realized, I pushed off the bike, because I realized in that instance that I was more afraid of him than I was of Splat. We all have incredible fears in our lives. We have to be willing to face those fears because they're not going to go away. I'm always going to be afraid of heights. I went to the top of the Willis Tower yesterday with my daughter-in-law, and she talked me into walking out into that glass cube. I never looked down, and I'm still shaking a little bit from it. But you have to be willing to face your fears, because if you aren't, what happens is that the size of your world begins to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Fears aren't rational. People who are afraid of snakes, it will not matter if you tell them what's in front of them is a garden snake, because they don't care that it can't hurt them. They care that it's a snake. So that irrational aspect of our fears doesn't mean that we can't overcome them. With a little bit of concentration, a little bit of work, and sometimes somebody reaching out their hand to help. Managing our fears is incredibly important. They did a study of lucky people that we would all have identified as the guy who always falls into doo-doo and comes out smelling like a rose. They studied these people to find out what about these people made them lucky. The interesting thing was that those lucky people were lucky because they were open to possibilities. The study called it engineering serendipity. So rather than saying, you know, I'm a psych major from a Midwestern little liberal arts school, and I couldn't possibly manage engineers because I'm not an engineer, I don't have an engineering degree. Instead of thinking that way, what these people would do is say, you know what, I may not be an engineer, I may not have that degree, but I'm analytical in my thinking. I understand how engineers think, I value what they do. I believe that I can set a vision for this team and make them feel like they're contributing to the goals and objectives of the larger organization. That's what lucky people do. We all have an opportunity to be lucky. At FedEx, we have a philosophy that's a people-first philosophy, but we're also incredibly focused on safety. So it's people first and safety always. The difficulty of safety, around safety, and obviously that's a big part of my job, is that we have a hard time agreeing on what safety looks like. I discovered that when my husband and I were talking about and disagreeing about safety when it came to my driving. Because he says I'm crazy, but I just drive a little fast. Now, if we were to have a conversation about my driving that talked about how much risk there is in my driving, we would agree. Because I know that the way I drive has a higher amount of risk associated with it, and I'm willing to do that because I believe I can manage that risk. Then what I do is offset that risk by ensuring that when I'm driving around lots of traffic or when there are drivers around me that look like I can't predict how they're going to behave, I don't drive as fast. I manage my speeds. In aviation, we enjoy an industry that is the safest transportation industry in the world. More people died at railroad crossings in the United States last year than in commercial aviation. That's pretty amazing. It's incredible. The downside of that is it's easy for us to be full of hubris around that and say, you know what, we're so good at what we do in aviation, there's no need to worry. Because it puts you in a position where you stop looking for other alternatives. You think you know all the answers rather than questioning where there's opportunity. I encourage my team not to think of themselves or categorize themselves as experts. Because as experts, we have a tendency not to be curious about the world, not to look for opportunity. And of course, we have to exist as in our industry by ensuring that we continue to manage risk effectively. This focus on curiosity is also connected to a commitment for making things better. Much like you enjoy in your organization, it's the looking for opportunity for continual improvement. Having the involvement of individual employees who ensure that they find opportunities for innovation. At FedEx, the values that we hold dear that I like to talk about are learning, leadership, innovation, and of course integrity. When we apply for a company and apply for a job to be part of an organization, we do that because of our perception of what that organization is like. But the reason that we stay is because the values of that organization and our values align. Make no mistake, if there's a disparity in those values, it won't matter how much power, prestige, or money that organization gives you, you won't be happy. So finding a place where you can believe you're at home is critically important. I see that as I move around the offices here, I see that in the words you guys have written on the wall. I see that in the mission statements in which you guys talk about as they're important to you in terms of values. And those are why you stay. Within AAR, you have all different, this diversity of organization in terms of responsibility as well as background and experience. There was a Harvard Business Review article that was published that talked about how really good performing companies are companies that have these effective functional silos. Within my organization, within air operations at FedEx, that might be that the flight operations organization is led by a single division head who sets the vision and strategy for the team. They have a shared lexicon in his organization because they understand one another's jobs. They know that they're focused around the pilots. But they are very different than a technical operations organization led by a different head who has his own vision and sometimes maybe some competing goals. They don't speak the same language. So a good company can continue to be good by those functional silos operating well. The article went on to say that really excellent companies are the ones that take advantage of where those functional silos touch. In my organization, we're calling that harnessing energy at the seams of the organization. When you come into a meeting with people who are different in background, either or education or experience, or come from a different functional part of the organization, when you have disagreements with those people, when you know you're headed toward the same goal, being able to see that conversation where there might be difference of opinion as an opportunity to leverage that to move the business forward is what makes an excellent organization. And that's something I believe you guys recognize here at AAR. When I was a brand new lieutenant in the Army, my first company commander was extraordinary. He was the epitome of an Army officer. He was very good looking, and he was very focused on his job. He didn't see the Army as a profession or just a job. He saw it as a way of life. I was talking to him what it felt like walking across the quad in front of our building when I was still a brand new lieutenant, because again, remember, I didn't come from a military family. And I told him how awing it was to have these young soldiers saluting me. Now, they didn't know me. They didn't know if I was a good leader. They saw this little butterbar on my cap, and they saluted me because they knew I was a second lieutenant. And I told him how amazing that felt to me. And he said, yes, you're right. Leadership is a privilege. And he said, but with that privilege of leadership comes a responsibility. Leaders don't walk by mistakes. Because if you walk by a mistake, you endorse it. That's important because we are all accountable to what happens around us. When you see someone that is working in an unsafe area, it's your responsibility to do something about it, to make sure they understand the risk that's apparent. When you see someone making a mistake, whether they understand it or not, it's incumbent on each of us to do something about it when we see it, because that's the demonstration of leadership. They did a study a number of years ago with dolphin trainers and dolphins. The researchers had the control group of dolphin trainers. They told them to get into the pool with the dolphins, these are dolphins that they worked with every day, run through their list of commands with them, and they were going to measure how quickly the dolphins swam toward the trainers, how accurate they were in responding to the commands, and then how long they stayed engaged with the trainers afterwards, after they finished. Then they told the experimental group, get into the pool, run through your list of commands, but they said, we want you to think about how this dolphin swimming toward you is different than all the other dolphins. Because dolphins have personalities like horses or dogs or any animal. So not only pay attention to how this dolphin is different than the other dolphins, but pay attention to how this dolphin may be acting differently just today. Dolphins have moods, good days and bad days, so really watch to see how this dolphin is behaving. And by the way, we're going to be measuring how quickly they swim toward you, how accurate they are in responding to the commands, and then how long they stay engaged with you. The researchers found that the experimental group of dolphin trainers, the dolphins swam toward the trainers faster, they stayed engaged longer, and they were more accurate in responding to the commands. And make no mistake, the dolphins that work with these trainers every day had no idea they were part of an experiment. All they noticed was that somebody was paying close attention to them. We all, every one of us, have this superpower available to us. It's called the power of attention. And what you pay attention to is what you give a tiny slice of your life to. Whether you give that attention to the people who mean a lot to you at home or at work, or whether you give that attention to your device when you're Facebooking or trolling the web, that little piece of your life you can never get back. We have a tendency to equate time and money. Time and money are not the same thing. We can always get more money. The minutes that we have and that we are responsible for it in every day are minutes we don't ever get back. Paying attention to the people around us creates value for them and makes them feel important in our lives. I've chosen to be part of the International Aviation Women's Association because I believe in IAWA's mission of promoting women in aviation and aerospace. IAWA's tenets are to connect, inspire, and lead. I would encourage everyone to participate and join in IAWA in this conversation around encouraging women in aviation and aerospace. Because connecting is what we're here for. If you want to inspire those around you, you do that by giving them a piece of your life with your dedicated attention to them. And if you want to lead in our industry, then you have to be willing to take responsibility for not walking by mistakes. Thank you all very much.